Hey, welcome to VOXOLOGY podcast here. A bit serious. YouTube, what's up, guys? Me and Tim is Steven, the mic.
Nice.
And special guest is me.
Special guest.
Yellow hair boring.
The yellow hair is still
Still
boring after all this time.
And I got happy face t-shirt.
Oh, he's got his happy face T-shirt on. He
Oh,
stepped
yeah.
away from the mic. That's a band he loves, and it's their kind of uniform. So
Yeah.
he's got a special made T-shirt.
Yep.
Seth Theory, ladies and gentlemen, on his way to get a haircut and go to Chick-fil-A as well. Yep. Because why do we need a haircut?
Because I'm so handsome.
Yes, you are so handsome. Yes, but why else do we need a haircut? What's starting on Monday?
High school.
High school is starting
on Monday already.
Monday.
Yeah.
I know, dude. August 5th.
Wow.
That's the dumbest thing. August is a summer month, Tim.
I agree. Check
And
the temperature.
Yeah, dude, it's awful. I cannot believe they started this early. But
Yep.
Franklin High School, bro.
Yep.
Let's do this.
Guess what?
What?
The high school go down, money up.
Syndrome down, money up, ladies and gentlemen. Watch out for it on Spotify, huh?
Yes, bye-bye, guys.
If you're new, that's a rap that he and his older brother made.
Syndrome down, money
up.
Money up.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Yes. We love it. All right. Sevi, we're going to get started, all right?
All right.
All right. Have fun with your haircut. So handsome.
Thank you, Mega.
You're welcome, Sevi. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. We're going to timestamp this because Tim is freaking amazing. We've got a bunch of questions today, and then we want to talk about the Lord's Supper.
Oh.
And Dionysius, if that's how you say it. So we got loads today. Timothy, you okay?
Yeah, I'm ready to cruise.
Yes, if you're on the YouTube, you can tell Tim got lots of sun, except where he was wearing sunglasses.
Yes.
So it's not only his blonde hair that looks boring today, it's around his eyes. All right, so we get loads of email, and it's so great. We try to read all of it, even if we can't get back to everybody. I don't normally weigh in on these types of things, but I've been listening to your podcast for a while. You've been reading these emails with listener input about the podcast. My sentiments are fairly summed up by whoever said, "It's your baby, do what you want with it." However, since you asked, I want to briefly share my opinion. I started listening to you guys because, all caps, you took 20 plus episodes to go through Revelation. In a world of microwave sound bites called Twitter or X, you actually took the time to go through biblical subjects in a way that honored their importance, complexity, and nuance. You respected the distance between us and those texts geographically, contextually, historically, literarily, and linguistically. And he has a parenthetical, yes, I'm a Bible geek too. Oh, yeah. Bible geeks unite. So I'm begging you not to pander to the fast food diet of the masses. Also, if people don't like your banter, they don't have to listen. Yeah, you don't have to live here. I enjoy it. But if others don't, it's not rocket science to skip ahead. And if you're going to drop the banter so you can be more shareable and build a bigger audience, may I remind you that a wise man once said, it's not about being effective, it's about being faithful.
Oh, who was that wise man?
Oh, I know, man. Don't ever quote our own words back to us, okay? First of all. And then, yes, he says he shared a lot of his episodes, and even some of them with my kids. They're high school and college age, and they thoroughly enjoy Seth's appearances. So they will like the beginning of this episode. All right. So here, this is definitely a team banter, and team nuance and complexity. And I wanted to read this one, for a couple of reasons. First, thank you for taking the time to give us that feedback. Secondly, we're not interested, and I don't know why I feel like I have to say this, but I really want to say this. We're not interested at all in trying to get a bigger audience, or pander fast food to the masses. If you're going to drop the banter, so you can be more shareable and build a bigger audience. So, because we've really wrestled with this. We've been doing this 9 years. I started this 9 years ago. Tim, how long have you been pilot seat, man?
I don't know.
At least 5.
At least 5. Maybe more than that.
I think a little longer than that. Yeah. And we've never, we've never taken really intentional steps to grow this thing, or to, we've
Some might
taken
say the
steps to not
opposite.
grow it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, believe us, we're not in this to get a bigger audience. Here's what we hear though from the audience that we have. A, I'd love to share this, but B, I can make no sense of your back catalog.
Yeah.
C, your website is horribly out of date.
Yeah.
D, your titles don't always let me know what the content's about. And E, it's tough to jump in when you're doing a 20 plus long series and I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So the goal isn't, at least for us, to get bigger because we want to pander to the masses. The goal is to make this more shareable and make this more discoverable. And if we get bigger, okay. And if we don't, okay.
Yeah.
We want to do a better job with the audience that we have, rather than worry about, we don't keep track. I mean, I have to ask Tim, and then Tim has to think about it for half an hour. We don't do a ton of metric stuff. Although we were introduced to a new metric a couple of weeks ago by a guy named Paul, who said, you should look at how far people listen to your podcasts, which I think is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I was like, oh, I didn't realize people just sort of stop in the middle of it.
Yeah.
We've probably lost 25% so far right now. So I don't know. I felt a little defensive around the idea that we're just interested in pandering to masses to get bigger for bigger sake. We've never done that, nor will we do that. I think when we talk about shorter series, what I mean is taking the Genesis series, and instead of just calling that To Be Human episode 1 through 2700, saying, how did God create the universe? Episode 1, episode 2, episode 3.
Yeah.
Is the 6-day creation story literal? Episode 1, 2, 3. Cover the same material, but make it more accessible to people who are like, hey, I don't need the 20 episodes on Revelation, but if we did a little mini series on the rapture, you'd cover the same ground.
Right.
But you'd make it more accessible and shareable for folks who are already listening. I think that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about not respecting nuance or complexity. That Tim and I, we couldn't do this if we weren't allowed to respect complexity, nuance, and take time through stuff. So I totally am with you. Thank you so much for your feedback. I want to make sure though that people are hearing that the goal is not world domination.
We still want it to be hard for people to access it. Shouldn't be arduous to try to figure out where you want to find content.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Or to skip through it or whatever. So we've got lots of work to do to shape up the back catalog. And as my wife closes the door very slowly and loudly. All right. This is from, check out this bio. Okay. And she sent me her picture. I'm a 75-year-old ordained woman who served in a global mission for 42 years, now serving in a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multilinguistic, multinational setting in the somewhat foreign country of Texas. My husband and I have been Ezra Konegdos for 52 years. All right. So that's her bio.
Yeah.
75, and she's a rock star. So she gave us some feedback. Thank you. The Tim, on the podcast today, this was the 29th of July, you articulated something I've intensely felt over recent years. How in the world did we get so far in the opposite direction of Jesus? So when you asked that transcendent question, I began to agree. She writes in parentheses, yes, that's it. That should be the question all of us ask, both individually and institutionally. That should cause us to lament much about the human story, close parenthesis. But God literally stopped me mid-sentence and said, but what is it that you always are teaching about the Old Testament? It was an aha moment for me. Here's what God reminded me, that throughout Scripture and human history, there's been a progressive revelation. Maybe there's a less triggering word than progressive revelation, but a progressive revelation of who God is, what God wills, what the kingdom should look like. So if that's true, then our question and lament over human failure to live kingdomly perhaps need to be seen from a different perspective. Perhaps instead of lament, we should be in awe that today God is revealing more of who he is and himself more fully to us. Perhaps instead of being angry or whatever each one of us feels at our ancestors, we should be grateful that some tried to live faithfully based on what they knew, trusting that their failures would inform our theological understanding and choices today. Just as our failures will, I pray, inform the theological understanding and choices of our progeny tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
There is much to lament, and we should, but I wonder if being disillusioned with our faithful ancestors is another way we fail to dignify human beings. Bro.
It's an interesting question.
Interesting question. And written by 75, ordained, still kicking butt, married 52 years, and asks a question like that. I love it. And that isn't a very interesting perspective. I do have mercy in my heart for the Israelites, because I realize I reenact their dumbness all over the place, same with the disciples. But I do have a harsher view of earlier Christians, like in America, who were justifying slavery or whatever, knowing that I'm sure there are massive blind spots that we have, that other generations will go, man, those guys were idiots. Absolutely. So I love that. I love that humility. And we should, and so maybe disillusioned isn't the right word. I think lament is a good word there. We should lament the ways in which the church hasn't lived up to the invitation of Jesus. But maybe more gracious with those in our immediate rearview mirror as opposed to those very far away. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim.
Yeah.
This is another one to you.
Uh-oh.
Just writing, because I've noticed a pet peeve of mine is when... Did you see this one?
No, but I like it already.
Kamala's name is mispronounced. It's not Kamala, it's Kamala. It like if you were just trying to say the word comma with a la at the end. Kamala. Okay? Not trying to be rude, but it's just the Republican Party mispronounces her name on purpose, and it irks my soul. Kamala. You're not being rude. Kamala. Perfect. Thank you. Let's see, 2 more. And then, so timestamp, Kamala. Hey, guys. Love the podcast. You guys were talking about how we deal with social media. I've been in youth ministry for 10 years, and this conversation has always been important. To tie this in with the humanity conversation, is it a responsibility in our human response to God to be a light to the world? I think so. How much more beautiful is the church when we shine in God's light? We could revolutionize social media with that task. Any teaching that seems to lead the church to remove itself from part of the world makes me very uneasy. Isn't that truly the opposite of our calling? Boom. What do you think of that, Timothy?
You're probably right.
I was thinking about our social media conversation too. And I agree with the general sentiment of we should not withdraw from the world. Mm-hmm. Jesus never encouraged that, and if he did, he only did it, to pray with the Father, be with his disciples. He was always withdrawing in order to better engage. So totally agree with that sentiment. I also agree with the idea that we are to be light and salt and whatever that might look like. As when we did our Sermon on the Mount series, that isn't always just being nice.
Right.
That's a very specific Israel call now applied to Jesus' disciples. So there's a lot going on there. The issue I have is this: are there ways in which we participate in culture that malform us as Jesus followers?
Yeah. So
you could easily say, hey, I listened to loads of Fox News, MSNBC, whatever, political chatter, because I want to be informed. That's my job as a Christ follower. But if that listening and participation causes us to not love our neighbor, to be angry and anxious, to be fearful and demeaning, then I would say I would rather us withdraw in order to be faithful rather than to stick it out in the name of being effective.
Yeah.
To quote a wise man who quoted a wise man. So my question isn't, should there be people on social media who are Christians? My question is rather, does social media consumption and participation malform us so that we're not as faithful in the ways that Jesus would say matter most. Now, of course, there are going to be some people who are eminently qualified and wonderful participants in the social media conversation. Love it, love it, love it. I don't ever come away from engaging in social media feeling better, more hopeful, and more loving towards the world. And I'm thinking, yep, I think you're right. I think there are people who should engage with it. I don't know that I am one of them.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like a hands and feet conversation of like, some people, like I have such bad anxiety and cynicism. It probably isn't best for me to be hanging out on Twitter forever. That doesn't mean that's the case for everybody. I just wonder if we just try to black and white compartmentalize so many things and just say this is the best route for this. But I was thinking about that in light of like working in the prison. You know, that's not going to be the best fit for everybody, but for some people it's going to be okay. You know, if you're I don't know, if you struggle with alcohol abuse and you wanted to go do missions work in a bar or something, that might not be your best. So, I don't know. I just think that there's some discernment and wisdom that can go into all these conversations. They're just like, hey, everybody don't do this or everybody do this.
Yeah.
I think the problem with social media is like the problem with Amazon. It's easy. It feeds you everything you want immediately. And it does it in a way obviously with algorithms that you're getting fed the outrage that you want. That's why I get so many political and Christian nationalist things coming through my Twitter, because I pause on them and click on them. But if I want to really affect that stuff, we have to be more, it takes more work, I guess what I'm saying. Everything is built to make life easier for us. And it turns out that to do things well, you have to work hard at them.
Oh, bro, seriously. There are times we absolutely want to confront our friend Tim Stafford.
Well, hey guys, did you read this? And I'll get all caps back. Get off your phone. Get off Twitter.
Oh, you poor guy. I know. All right, one more. Timestamp, one more. And our website is in desperate need of updating. We know. We just, we could, that's an expensive proposition. So we're waiting for the Etsy store to take off there. Hey, VOXOLOGY.
Don't like the website? Go buy a sweatshirt.
Yes. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Love that opening. Always. Sorry, some very, very kind words. And this is going back to some of our earlier conversations on parenting. I love the quote about trying to catch our kids and doing something, rather than catching them doing something bad or wrong. That actually ruins the trust of the approach of staying connected. Yeah. My thought is it also ruins the trust that the child has overall in the parent. So when I recently read a statement that a pastor had prepared and published about their own child-specific sin, in this case, having sex before married, and addressed it in front of their in front of their congregation. Yeah. I couldn't help but think of your conversation and how damaging it must be for this child to have their parent do this to them. The amount of shame and distrust this would bring is immense. I didn't think this approach was very mature or wise of the pastor. What would you say about this pastor's approach, and how would you approach it differently? And then he put a link to the statement. And because it's public, I'm not going to hesitate. I'm not going to say where it is. But and obviously we have better things to do than critique how other people do things, because good Lord knows we need critiquing.
That'd be a daily podcast.
Right? Yeah, Idiocy by Mike and Tim. But this is it was just an interesting it brings up interesting questions about what should be private in a pastor's life. I announced that my young, on a certain Sunday, I announced that my young unmarried daughter is pregnant. I love my girl more than I can communicate, and I would have preferred to keep this information private. However, the nature of my ministry means that the consequences of her private sin will be more public than it would be for most young women in her situation. I'm sharing this information with the approval of her and the rest of our family. We know that in short order, the nature of her sin will be obvious. But the nature of her repentance will not be unless you hear it from me. And then, this young lady had an encounter, confessed. You know, our family's walking through this. I'm doing three things over the course of this time. I'm listening. Upon learning of this news, the first thing my wife and I did was we reach out to people we love and trust in our family. We've shared our hurt and confusion and made clear that my commitment in these days is to listen to others, I think is the idea, and follow advice. He talked to the pastors, leaders in our church, blah, 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 blah. Secondly, he's been loving. I'm focusing on my precious daughter whose sin has led her into an overwhelming world she never anticipated. I'm focusing on loving my wife and two sons who've been disoriented by this news. I'm also working to love the man I now know as the father of my grandchild. He has been guilty of significant sin, but as I've shared with him, his sin may be different than mine, but they're not worse. He has asked the Lord for forgiveness and received it. He's asked for our forgiveness and received it. But this young man has not run away, but he has responded with courage and grace. He and my daughter are working independently in their relationships with God. We're discerning the best path forward for their relationship. And then the last one is trusting. At the age of 44, I'm a grandfather, something I did not ask for or would have sought. I know God is going to bring good out of this situation. And he says some nice things about his daughter in conclusion. So, man, I feel crushed because I don't know about you, Tim. My kids are perfect. And so, you know.
It's just a foreign topic to you.
Yeah, I just can't imagine my kids blowing it like this. So, but I also want to be really tender with how people kind of understand these sorts of things. If the question is, hey, Mike and Tim, do you agree with this approach? The answer is 100,000% no. Nope. It's no one's business. And it doesn't matter how important you are to the church. I think I would rather, yeah, exactly. I would rather resign than publicly shame my kid. I'm not saying he publicly shamed his kid. I'm saying it could absolutely feel that way to the kid. And I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what all of this was initially met with? So do I think there are much healthier ways of handling such a thing? Yeah, like not telling the congregation. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And if your personal holiness demands that you have to make the congregation aware of your sins, well, then let's start with yours. Mm-hmm. And maybe you have, but I mean, let's not just single her out here. And it feels like the only reason it's singled out is because it's public. And so it's public, so I have to make it public. And I can kind of understand that, right? I mean, people are going to see that she's pregnant and they're going to draw conclusions. And I could understand at least the counsel that would say, hey, it'll be better for, yeah. You'll be better for her. And so I'm open to that counsel being wise counsel. I just think for the sake of your daughter's more important than your damn ministry. Mm-hmm. And so I think I would have made a different choice.
That's a hot take.
Yes. And our kids do not reflect on us. So,
no.
You know, when they feel that, I mean, my kids are just notoriously sinful. They really are. They are ridiculous. Absolutely. They're pulling stuff off I never pulled. You know what I mean? And they, you know, one of my kids who I will not identify publicly said to me, I'm going to be able to relate so much better with my kids than you did with us. I'm like, I don't think that's a great idea.
Oh man. Well, my initial reaction was like, what would you say to him? My emotional immediate reaction would be to say, get behind me, Satan. But then I'm going to take a breath. Listening to his response or his post or his whatever proclamation, whatever he wants to call it.
Yeah.
What I see more now is that this is a cultural failure.
Yes.
Not necessarily just this guy.
Yes.
And so we could lambast him all day, but he won't. Like,
no, I don't want to.
Yeah.
He's a dad who loves his girl.
Yeah, but there's a failure that this is how they think they need to operate this. And
Correct.
He thinks he's doing like a martyr's God's work by sacrificing his daughter at the throne or whatever. And it's just...
Well, he wouldn't say that he is.
I know.
There's no way.
I know.
But you're right. That's a cultural... He's been
fed this and built this way to react this way to this. And
yeah.
But I've also been in churches where I have seen a pastor do this exact same thing. And later it came out that he was involved in like a lengthy affair. And it was kind of one of those things where I was like, well, you know, he felt the need to lambaste his child's, you know, quote unquote sexual sin or whatever. But it was like, are you scapegoating?
Yeah. Projecting perhaps.
Are you azazeling?
Nice. Look at you go with the Levitical reference. Wow.
It's a Heiser.
Wow. Yeah, Tim just finished Michael Heiser's book on supernatural beings. So Tim is woo. All right. So bookmark that. We're 26 minutes in. Bookmark it. We're getting to the topic of the day because Tim, I don't know if you know this. There has been lots to be outraged about in the world this week. I know, shocking. And I'm specifically talking about the Olympic ceremony.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Deadpool and Wolverine. Because they're also really angry about that.
Are they really?
Yeah, because he refers himself as the Marvel Jesus, which is in the trailer, not a spoiler. But like he's going to save the Marvel universe. And Christians are like, this is demonic. I walked out in the first 5 minutes.
Okay. I just watched their Hot Ones episode and it was not demonic.
They were dying.
They were dying. You've never seen two Caucasian men who play tough guys melt
sweat out of their eyeballs
before the onslaught of hot wings.
Oh man.
Okay, so we're recording this on a Friday, and when did the Olympics happen?
This week.
When did they start?
I don't know.
So for those of you that are on social media, you're probably done with this. So we don't want to talk about exactly like who's at fault or what was intended. We want to talk about how Christians respond to this stuff, and how might we respond differently. So to paint the picture, we're going through. I didn't watch the opening ceremonies. I was in Florida and I did not care. But all of a sudden, one morning I wake up and the social media feed is blowing up with, you know, like images of the Last Supper and trans folks parading around and a headless woman singing and a heavy metal band with flames shooting out of castles. Awesome. And I'm like, I mean, yeah. And all of a sudden I'm seeing this, a lot of stuff flooding the timeline, calling out this depiction of the Lord's Supper. And I've read, I spent way too much time yesterday trying to figure out, was this intentional or not? And I have no idea. The one of the people who was a part of it said, this is the gay New Testament, and then deleted that post. The originator said, yeah, he was inspired, but it's Da Vinci. He's French and he's gay. Mm-hmm. And so there, you know, the headless woman was Marie Antoinette, and then other people are saying, no, it's the feast of Dionysius, because Dionysius was obviously the dude in blue. And so I have no idea, nor do I care if it was intentional or not. Yeah. It's certainly, I can understand why people said it was, and I can understand why people said it wasn't. I don't, and you know, it doesn't matter for the point we want to make today. But I want to note very briefly the responses. First response, outrage. And these are just from my timeline. The 2024 Paris Olympics has gone full woke dystopian.
Barf.
Well,
I'm so sick of them using that word though.
What, woke?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that one means, but no worries. The opening ceremony, this is a different tweet, was filled with transgendered mockery of the Last Supper, the golden calf idol, I missed that, and even the pale horse from the book of Revelation.
Right.
The Olympics, different tweet, made it clear that Christian viewers aren't welcome. And then this was from the Speaker of the House, I think, who wrote, last night's mockery of the Lord's Supper was shocking and insulting to Christian people around the world who watched the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. And to be fair, if I don't know that the Olympic opening ceremony is the time to make such statements, but okay, let's say that that's true. But then he continues, the war on our faith and traditional values knows no bounds today. But we know that truth and virtue will always prevail. And then he quotes John 1, the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness does not overcome it. Talking about Jesus. Different tweet, drag queens mock Christianity during opening ceremony of the Olympics in Paris as they attempt to recreate Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper. Different tweet, not only are Christians the only people that is socially acceptable to mock, it's actually celebrated and put front and center when it happens. Remember the words of Jesus, if the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it's hated you. There will be a day when that mocking turns into fear of the one true God. Hopefully it happens before it's too late. And I don't know what too late would look like. And then we had this quote was just all over from Galatians. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that one will also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will reap from his flesh corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will reap from the Spirit eternal life. Now, that was movement number one, was outrage. Then movement number two, which Tim Stafford probably was a part, at least initially, was outrage at the outrage.
What? No, I was just laughing.
Okay, so you weren't even, there was no outrage. So then we had people outraged that Christians were outraged. So this is other Christians being outraged.
Inception.
Christians outraged. Oh, just it gets worse. So
wait, so you're worried now? You're at people being outraged at Christians being outraged at the outrage.
No, the Last Supper thing. People were outraged.
Yes,
Christians were outraged. Then other Christians were outraged at them for being outraged.
Oh, gotcha.
So lots of this on my hey, evangelicals, you're narcissistic. Not everything's about you. Hey, you have a persecution complex. How can you think you're being persecuted when, you follow Trump and whatever? So just a couple examples of this. Last I checked, Leonardo's painting of the Last Supper is not found in the Bible. A satire or homage to the painting is a statement about art and culture, not about God, you idiots. He didn't say you idiots. But there are also Battlestar Galactica has a Last Supper representation. So does The Simpsons. So does Sopranos. Another tweet. What if last night's opening ceremony had nothing to do with the Last Supper, but was instead the opening of the Greek games, paying homage to a Greek god? If you're a Christian, save your persecution complex for actual persecution. All right. So you have the Olympic opening ceremony. You have Christians outraged. All right. Then you have other Christians who are outraged at Christians being outraged. Are you with me?
Yes.
Now, this is where it gets funky. Then you have Christians being outraged that Christians are outraged at Christians being outraged.
Okay. And this is not the first demographic now turning on the second demographic. This is a third demographic.
This is a third demographic sticking up for the first demographic.
Gotcha.
All right. So, and I'm just going to read one, and I transcribed it because it was a video,
gotcha.
And it really represents some very bad thinking.
Okay.
So this is what this gentleman says. He's a pastor. Righteous anger is a biblical principle. Now that's an interest. Okay, I won't critique it yet. But is anger a principle? I don't know. When your great God is being mocked, you should be offended. It should stir something inside of you. I want to comment as we go. Should I comment as we go, or should I read the whole thing? What do you think?
Well, it's hard because it's hard to differentiate if someone's listening in between your words and his words.
Fair. Okay, here's his words. Here's all of his words transcribed. Righteous anger is a biblical principle. When your great God is being mocked, you should be offended. It should stir something inside of you. I'm not talking about anger that drives you to hurt somebody. I'm not talking about anger that justifies you being a jerk for Jesus. I'm not even talking about anger out of selfish reasons when you're personally offended. I'm talking about when your great God is being mocked.
This is literally what
we should be offended. You're not helping, Tim.
I know. I'm sorry.
You see righteous anger practiced all throughout the entire Bible. The Old Testament prophets, David, when Goliath was mocking God, Jesus in the temple overturning tables because his father was being mocked. The disciples, the Apostle Paul, all were offended each time their great God was being mocked and their faith was being mocked. But could you imagine, quote, modern American Christians going back at those guys in the Bible saying, we're going to mock you for being so offended? Just love and stop judging? Why are you making up reasons to be offended? Righteous anger is a biblical principle, meaning when our great God who bled for us is being mocked, we should be offended. The question is not, why are you offended? The question should be, why are you not offended? Okay, so that was the video, and it perfectly encapsulates the outrage at Christians being outraged at other Christians for being outraged. All right?
Oh, man.
We are a light to the world, baby, on social media. There is no doubt.
No.
All right, so I want to go through this. And again, man, I'm the biggest just jerk for Jesus in the history of the planet. These people, I don't know them, and I'm sure they're wonderful. It's just the ideas sometimes that are represented.
Yeah.
That's all we're trying to go after.
Everybody knows very well that I am the biggest outrager in the room.
I mean, in this room, yes. In most rooms, yes. Tim is so nice. But his therapist is like, just go touch grass, bro. Literally, go touch grass. So good. All right. So I want to go through this. Righteous anger is a biblical principle. Now, it sounds like he's saying that righteous anger is recommended.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get descriptions of righteous anger, we should read those as prescriptions of righteous anger. Totally. And I would disagree with that.
Yeah.
When your great God is being mocked, you should be offended. Something should stir inside of you. And yes, for me, when I saw this, I'm like, man, I didn't watch any other part of the ceremony, but I certainly would want my kids, if they were younger, to be able to watch the Olympic ceremonies without a bunch of questions. It was interesting. Somebody contrasted the individualism of the French opening ceremony with the collectivism of the Chinese ceremony, where you had 500 drummers drumming in time. It was just an interesting celebration of two radically different cultures.
Which is usually what that's meant to do.
Exactly. So in one sense, it was a great celebration, like an accurate celebration of French culture. So it should stir something. Yes. What it stirred in me sadness. I don't know that I took offense. I don't know that I should be offended on behalf of God, but I think there was sadness there. And I like that he says, I'm not talking about anger that drives you to hurt or justifies being a jerk, not even being personally offended. So thank you for those nuances. I'm talking about when you see your great God being mocked, you should be offended. And then he points to righteous anger practiced throughout the entire Bible. Now, here's what's interesting. In all of his examples, the righteous anger was directed at followers of God, not at unbelievers.
Correct.
So he actually is making the opposite point of the point he thinks he's making.
Yeah.
So I even looked up the David story, and David was disgusted with Israel for not going and confronting this, uncircumcised Philistine who defies the armies of the. So his anger wasn't at Goliath. His anger was actually at Israel. So it's fascinating. The Old Testament prophets were angry at God's people. David angry at God's people. Jesus at the temple angry at God's people. It was when God's people who didn't act like God's people that righteous anger was appropriately used.
Yep.
Even Jesus with the whip at the temple, right? God's people.
Which is brought up so much lately, not just with this, but that the table flipping has been.
Oh my goodness. Well, here's one great line. I don't know who tweeted this, but it's a great line. Jesus didn't say go and do likewise after he fashioned a whip and flipped tables. He said go and do likewise after the Good Samaritan showed mercy to his neighbor.
Amen.
Or as Dallas Willard, my favorite dude ever, says,
Willie,
I can trust Jesus with a whip when I cannot trust myself with one.
Yeah.
Right?
Or even less than that. Yeah, totally.
So I just think, yes, is righteous anger real in the Bible? Yep, it sure is. But I find it interesting that it's rarely, if ever, directed at unbelievers. Rather, it's directed at the church.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first saw this, my first thought wasn't, oh, how blasphemous. Although, man, I think that if you're coming from the LGBTQ community, having a transgender Last Supper is kind of like the biggest sort of, F you can say, like, to the Christian community. I get that. But I'm also sitting there going, I think I know how we're going to respond to this, and I grieve this. I grieve that my kids probably
the response or the. Are you saying you grieve the response, or you grieve the actual Last Supper?
I grieve both.
Yeah.
Because I also understand. I mean, I grew up. The big thing when I was in college was somebody put a crucifix in a jar of urine, and it was called Piss Christ. I kid you not. And there was a massive debate when I was in college about free speech and how you should handle that. And so mockery of Jesus has been around since day one. I mean, the crucifixion itself is mockery. So I'm not personally offended when people look at the Christian story the way it's been portrayed in a lot of our lives and go, this is really awful.
That's the key for me. Like I can give two
say it. No, rats. Yep.
About
ding dongs.
Like when I saw the ceremony, I didn't think anything of it, especially because it's like that painting's not a Christian painting.
Right.
It's a work. I mean, it's just like it's like if they were acting out the actual Last Supper and playing on something just to deliberately mock, but it's like it's not. It's a work of art by a French painter who was gay. Like it takes
for days.
10 seconds to unravel that.
Right.
And plus too, what do you always say in the culture war conversation? How often do you say Jesus doesn't need our saving?
We're going there, Tim.
So the clean up your own house thing, like just
right. Yeah. Well, I just thought this was such a great example.
Wait, one last thing with that, just real quick. Like are they mocking Jesus? Maybe. But I feel like more they're mocking exactly what you said at the end there. The way that the church has represented Jesus and what Jesus is about for eons now. And that's ripe for mockery.
Yeah. So here's Paul's words. So contrast the righteous anger guy with the Apostle Paul. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Mm-hmm. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. For by doing so, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
It's pretty clear.
So it does seem that way, doesn't it? Now, there were two. There are two bits of advocating for how Christians should respond going forward. All right, so we have outrage at outrage. Then we have the takes of, okay, so how should we go forward? Elon Musk, follower of Jesus clearly, says, unless there is more bravery to stand up for what's fair and right, Christianity will perish. And I would argue that Jesus would argue that Christianity perishes exactly when Christians stand up and fight. Mm-hmm. So you quote Paul there, and then there was this other guy who's a very well-known rabble rouser on the tweets. He said, if France had mocked Islam, there would have been a war in the streets, but they know the cost of mocking Christianity will draw no serious response whatsoever. Ask yourself why that is. Okay, well, could it be that the guy we follow said, bless those who persecute you? Yeah. And love your enemies. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why. There's another very this is hypervigilance. So one response is to fight. Another response is to withdraw in Christian bubbles. So in my view, this author says, the blasphemous depiction of drag queens mimicking the Last Supper was a bold statement by the Olympic producers in collaboration with Euro globalists, signaling their intent to reshape the world in their own distorted image. The act symbolically declares that the New World Order they envision seeks to systematically dismantle the Judeo-Christian values that have underpinned Western civilization. So how can we respond? Faithfully building strong churches, discipling biological and spiritual children to establish enduring generational legacies, and by developing parent-controlled educational systems in schools.
What was the biological what?
Biological and spiritual children to establish enduring generational legacies. This is the classic, hey guys, have more babies than they do and raise them Christian. But then I love developing parent-controlled educational systems and schools. Now, this author also has some really great things to say, like seek the good of your city, like raise up like solid Christian people in law and in media. So it's not just the like go into your bubble, but that first paragraph certainly kind of represented that thinking.
Well, it's hard not to read those other things in lieu of that first paragraph.
Right. Yeah, that's true. True. So all this is to say, the reason we're going through this is because in our To Be Human series, we're talking about ruling and reigning and the exercise of power,
imaging,
what it is, imaging. And so, yes, it is not shocking that people who do not know Jesus image God poorly. We all image something. And so there is the serpent's lie that's still out there that is, yeah. God's holding out. He's not good. He's actually not for your flourishing. So, go do what you want. And that before that lie hit the 21st century American culture, it's been embedded in every culture, every person ever since. But the issue for me that's interesting, and the reason I wanted to talk about it, and when you and I were talking about it yesterday, saying, yeah, I think we should talk about this, is it brings us back to the Sermon on the Mount and what it means to be fully human. There are reasons to be righteously angry. I'm not sure this is one of them. So a couple of thoughts, and Tim, please chime in, respond, be curious. I'll be curious, whatever. A couple of thoughts as I was reading all of this. First, there isn't a single person there that Jesus wouldn't have invited to his table. Now, that doesn't mean they would have responded, but it's interesting that the picture they use to mock the exclusivity of Christians is actually the picture that paints Jesus in the most inclusive light. Now, not every sinner wanted to be with Jesus. Not every sinner repented, not whatever, but they were all invited to the table. They're all welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw them like, again, I don't know if it was intended to mock. If it were intended to mock, it's interesting that what's being mocked is a table full of sinners with Jesus, right? Thomas, the doubter, Peter, the denier, Judas, the betrayer, James and John, who've argued about who's the greatest, right? Mm-hmm. And then in the depiction in the Olympic ceremony, it was all of these people that Christians would deem as, horribly sinful. And so on the one hand, it's like you can't mock something that has already debased itself in the eyes of culture. In other words, when Jesus hangs on a cross and is enthroned, you can't mock that because the cross itself was mockery. You know what I mean? It like when God willingly takes on the shame and scorn, when Paul says, yeah, the cross is nonsense and foolishness and offense, that's what he's talking about.
And he asks for their forgiveness.
And yeah, he
doesn't say
them.
Like, screw these mockers, look what they're doing, pick up your sword now, Peter, go find it, pick it back up, and then go ravage for me.
So that was one thing that came into my brain, was like, oh, Jesus would have eaten with these people. And we would all been scandalized. The scandal we felt if Jesus of Nazareth was there would have been the scandal we would have felt.
With. Yeah.
Yes. We're the Pharisees. Yes. Secondly, when Christians pile on unbelieving folks who've not committed to Christ, I get cranked up there. And that's where I would look at the Old Testament prophets and Jesus and Peter saying the judgment begins with the house of God, and Paul even saying, who am I to judge those outside the church? So to me, the bad behavior of Jesus followers, including myself, is the first thing I'm thinking about. It's not the bad behavior of other. Andy Stanley had this great line years ago. He just said, I expect Christians to act like Christians and non-Christians to act like non-Christians. So to pile on in the name of Jesus in unvery Jesus-like ways, I think that's the greater blasphemy.
It's like the Lord's name in vain conversation.
Absolutely. Like, if you've got folks who are just fine with depictions of Trump on a cross, or selling a Bible with his autograph in it, who are offended then at this, I mean, the outrage, and to some degree, all of our outrage is selective. Absolutely. So sure. Mine is too. But there is a bit of hypocrisy when we're outraged at blasphemy outside of our tribe, but we're totally fine with blasphemy inside of it.
Yeah, everybody just go outside and stand in the grass.
We need more grass. And I don't mean that in the California sense, Stafford. The other thing I was reminded of is that the first artistic depiction of the cross, I think, now this, I may be wrong, but I had read the first artistic depiction of the cross was a piece of graffiti found on a wall that, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it was painted. It's not painted in a church by believers, but it was an ancient graffiti mocking believers. So it was like Alexandros, and I don't think that's his name, but it was like Alexandros something, is worshiping his God. And it was a picture of a man stretched out on a cross with a donkey's head. So that's the earliest, according to this source, the earliest artistic representation of the cross was that. So it's not like this is a new phenomenon, that people would mock the believings of Jesus followers. And so if we're gonna get offended every time somebody mocks our great God, I mean, I think that really takes us away from the role of the church in the world. And that's my last point. Jesus told us when we are insulted how to respond. He told us that very clearly. We have a whole series on that. And Dallas Willard, of course, great line. People count on our resistance and anger to support the continuation of the evil that is in them.
100%.
If we respond as Jesus indicates, the force of their own action pulls them off their stance and forces them to question what kind of people they are. So this is the creative goodness thing of turning the other cheek and going the extra mile, right? So when people count on our resistance, it just further cements their ideas of what Christians are and what Christians do. So how should we respond? Well, I'm gonna read a quote from Paul, another one. This is my favorite. So Paul has some time in Athens,
and Paul's an angry dude too. Like
he seems like he gets fired up.
Yeah. So
I wish those guys are like arguing for circumcision would just cut everything off.
Yeah, but I mean that in light of like, as you hear these words of like how he's talking about how to treat enemies and whatever, like it's not like he was like perfect. Yeah, he was practicing. He was pushing through something I think he knew pretty well.
Yes,
being angry and whatever. Like he was modeling something different.
So he's in the city of Athens, and Athens at this point where Paul's visiting is past its cultural zenith. I mean, it's still one of the wonders culturally of the world, known for its philosophy, known for its debates. I mean, obviously Greek, what Rome did was co-opt so much of Greek thinking, values, architecture, drama, art, so on. But Athens itself was not the economic and cultural hub it had been. Paul finds himself there with nobody, and he's walking around the city. Some ancient writers say they estimate that there were 10,000 statues to idols in the city. More statues than there were residents, is what one ancient historian quipped. So Paul is immersed and drenched in idolatry and injustice and blasphemy. And he gets invited. Well, I'll just read you the text. while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he did feel something, absolutely. And it's interesting, his distressedness, what does that cause him to do? So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. So he goes to the Jewish synagogue and the Roman marketplace. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" So babbler, insult, mockery. Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. They took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting?" It was a place where you would go and present ideas to the established philosophers of the day. Now notice how he speaks. People of Athens. See, I hear Jesus. People of Paris. Mm-hmm. I see that in every way you are very religious. I see that in every way you're seeking to find fulfillment as humans, as true humans, right? That's the tone I hear from Jesus. Paul said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. This is what I'm going to proclaim to you." I love that. He finds by their own admission, in case they missed one of the gods, boom. And he's like, okay, here we go. Now, what he does next is the gracious dismantling of both Stoic philosophy and Epicureanism. Mm-hmm. It's brilliant. We don't have time to look at all the details, but I want you to feel what the approach is. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth. So he said the God singular, and the Lord is the Lord of heaven and earth. And so in one sentence, the God who is the Lord, who owns all of it, does not live in temples built by human hands. He's surrounded by temples. He is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. So all your temple worship, come on, guys. Rather, he gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man, he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. He did this so they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from every one of us. And then he quotes, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, but he quotes their own poets and prophets. Right? For in him we move, we live and move and have our being.
So you're saying Paul is well versed in their culture?
Yes. Well, that is a line that was used in praise of Zeus.
Yeah.
And so, as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he's appointed. Notice he's not appealing to hell. He's not using the 10 Commandments. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. Now that's the sticking point. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered. So some mocked. But others said, we want to hear you again on this subject. At that, Paul left the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus. When I read that and realized that was his name, and I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Meaning, again, go ahead, outrage or outrage at outrage or outrage or outrage. I just saw no one quoting the bless those who persecute you. Mm-hmm. I saw no one practicing that. I shouldn't say I saw no one. I'm just saying that was not on my feed. I'm sure there were plenty of people who were thinking those things.
Yeah.
And it's so easy when we live in a culture war attention economy to just see everything as a threat.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, hey, we shouldn't be offended by this. Okay, it was. It was something that, I can understand how
it was
people got too offended.
As art often is.
Often is, especially your songs. So I get why people were upset about it. I just am interested. And then yesterday there was a boxer who is competing as a woman, who just beat the living daylights out of another female boxer, and the other female boxer, just after 45 seconds, said, I'm just done. I've never been hit so hard in my life. And then of course it blows up with, why are trans people in the Olympics? Why should men be allowed to, compete in women's events? It comes out later. She's actually got women's reproductive parts, but her chromosomes, maybe, no one's proven this, but the rumor is she's got an XY chromosomes, and she has elevated levels of testosterone. One sort of genetic testing ruled her out. Another set of testing allowed her to participate. And again, the debate isn't, is she a man or woman? Let's have that discussion. The debate is, how should those people be treated, and how should we conduct ourselves in having very important conversations about what does it mean to be male or female, and how do the genders relate?
This one makes me far angrier than the silly painting conversation.
What makes you angry? Okay, what makes you angry?
Because this kind of this is such a good example of what we were talking about with the pastor at the beginning, and that culture raising and just this what social media or Amazon, this immediacy of outrage, this immediacy of fear, this immediacy of whatever, and how we just happens in the moment, and we're all riled up and angry, but it's what that outrage does. Now the outrage towards the painting is whatever, people are trying to justify it or having these angry conversations, but the outrage over this is going to lead to more transphobia and more people being harmed. That boxer, she's in danger. There are people out there that are so angry and so outraged over something they don't even understand. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be human suffering because of that. Yeah. And that's what really pisses me off.
Yeah. Well, and it was a classic rush to judgment. I mean, all of these people, they saw the video's ugly, and she has some masculine looking features.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at this. I mean, the shock value of it is there. Yes.
But more and more comes out about her that she's lost a bunch of fights to women that
exactly.
Or people were bringing up Michael Phelps and his genetic, how genetically different he is than the average swimmer, with double jointed and these lower, all this stuff,
lung capacity.
But yeah, it's not, that's not a thing that people want to, they're just they're in awe of him and what he was doing.
Right.
Whereas she, it's just this, I don't know. I have so many opinions and thoughts on this, but it's just, be careful with what you do, people, or how you react or how you respond to things, regardless of your opinions.
Yeah. Again, let's have the wonderful conversation of how to protect women, mm-hmm. And how to honor people who are transitioning or have transitioned. Let's do all of that together. But and I'm not, man, I hate talking about this because I don't ever want to come across as somebody who's just perfectly blessing those who persecute, or never returning evil for evil. There was somebody that cut me off the other day that I wanted to do. I wanted evil. I didn't do evil, but I wanted. My heart said do evil. I said, I'm not going to do evil.
That's a tough spot to practice all this.
It is. Yeah. When you feel like someone put your life in danger because they're dumb, and you just want to let them know that they were dumb. Yeah. But I did not. Point is, Tim and I are two guys who are just probably less holy than the vast majority of our audience.
I accept that. And
we're trying to figure out how in the HELL do we follow Jesus in the midst of all of this chaos. Mm-hmm. And for me, this embodies the whole social media conversation. If Christians were being light in social media, I'd say, okay,
sure.
I think we're discipled anti-Jesus by social media, quite honestly. And you can say, the emailer said, hey, we shouldn't let any part of culture sit kind of unredeemed. I don't know. I don't know when it malforms us so badly. I just don't know.
Well, remember we were talking about evangelism with Gombis, like I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, and he made the comment of like you should be wary of evangelizing anybody because you're kind of signing up to walk with them for life.
Yeah.
And that is always kind of stuck in my craw when I think
I'd rather you burn in hell than me have to walk with you for your life. Yes.
But this conversation feels somewhat similar to that, where it's like you just feel like you can just make some outrageous claim on social media and you're going to redeem the world. But more likely what's going to happen is that since you're not doing something relationally with the people that you're yelling and barking at, you are causing harm. Like it's gonna have the opposite effect.
Let's go, Blondie. Come on, call me.
So much anger and hate, and it always leads to suffering.
Say it, Yoda. Oh, so good, Timothy. So first of all, y'all, I'm a Nashvilleian, so I can use that authentically. Y'all, thank you for the emails, the feedback, the pushback. We love it, and we enjoy learning with all of you. Secondly, please receive our gratuitous sinfulness in the way it's received. We're not sitting here as experts on any of this. We're just trying to help ourselves and each other. We have all of these conversations by ourselves. That's the thing.
Yes.
We have all of these are ongoing conversations we have all the time, and then we get plugged into this. And we certainly have better things to do than criticize other Christians who are criticizing non-Christians. But we're just trying to imagine what the Sermon on the Mount would demand of us if we were to take it seriously in these sorts of issues.
Yeah.
We have an Etsy store, and the reason you need to visit the Etsy store is because we need a new website. And so let's just make a pipeline straight from there. We need somebody to buy 10,000 beanies.
There you go.
And maybe that'll help. No, not at all. Etsy store is just a fun way because some people have asked for it. So anyway, Tim, do you feel like after this episode, our audience has gotten bigger or smaller, and why?
I have no idea.
Okay. Do you think how many people out of 10, how many people have made it this far?
Well, statistically, 7.5.
All right. Shout out to the half person. That's the half listening while they're on the elliptical. Perfect. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we've had an assassination attempt, a presidential candidate drop out, the Olympics. I would love just some calm days to get back into Genesis. We could finish this series before 2025 happens.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
I know,
just
right?
Ramping up.
So
everything we just talked about was just from this week, or really the last couple of days.
I know. It's absolutely nuts. Anywho, hope something of this is helpful, friends. We're so grateful to be a small part of your life. Until next time, say it, Tim.
Go love your neighbor and your enemy.
Whoa. Oh, I thought there was a bye coming.
Oh, bye. No.
You're dropping rocks. And hey, next topic is, when did Snoop Dogg become a national icon?
I don't know.
Our mascot. Oh my goodness. I'm like,
he's just
this guy used
joy.
to rap about horrible things.
Well, we believe in the redemption of people.
That's true. I mean, I didn't, maybe I rapped about horrible things and I've just forgotten. Anyway, bye.